The CIA's new interrogation room is your phone. Your phone pings. Heart rate jumps. Before you even unlock it, the system has already flagged you. Your 2.7-second hesitation, last night's search spiral, the extra swipe on a message you didn't answer. It predicts what you'll do next with better odds than your best friend. Get this. The new interrogation room isn't fluorescent and tiled. It's your feed, your notifications, your quiet 2 a.m. scroll. We're tracing a verified shift from physical rooms to ambient, AI-driven psychological assessment. For ARCs guide us, digital panopticon, prediction engines, social architecture, and a sovereignty kit you can use. We start with the bridge, how the room became the feed. From room to feed. To understand the jump, go back to the 1950s, 2000s playbook. Controlled rooms, isolation, rapport, stress, confession. Everything depended on proximity. Body language read across a steel table, beat-by-beat control of time and temperature. Now remember, post-2020, the incentives flipped. When you can read someone's inner weather from their phone, there's no need for the room. The assessment happens first, passively, continuously. Here's the stakes shift. Privacy loss turns into leverage when it scales. One person's browsing isn't much. A city's hesitation signatures after a market dip? That's a pressure window. A nation's late-night search clusters around layoffs? That's a narrative foothold. When patterns speak louder than words, direct questions become optional. And sometimes counterproductive because questions wake defenses. Silent analysis doesn't. What changed wasn't just technology, it was doctrine. Policy and training updates after 2020 leaned into digital psychological analysis. Low friction, low attribution, high yield. The feed offers something the room never could. A live map of stress, attention, and belonging. And because it feels like everyday life, people don't brace. No mirrored wall. No clock on the table. Just your routine, softly measured. The human moment inside this machinery is tiny, almost invisible. The hesitation signature. That half beat when your thumb hovers over a like. The pause before replying to a manager. The delayed checkout you abandon at 1:13 a.m. A 2.8-second stall looks like nothing. Stacked across days, across contexts, it becomes a marker, conflict, uncertainty, susceptibility to social proof. In the room, an interrogator had to notice a blink. In the feed, the pattern notices you. Meanwhile, something else was happening. The pipes fused. Device telemetry, social logs, purchase timing, location drift. Each on its own is a whisper. Together, they cohere into an assessment-first model. No opening question. No, tell me about your day. The system already has a draft of your answer and tests it with content timing, tone, and peer cues. Here's where the leverage clicks. In a fluorescent room, the threat was overt. Online, the threat is ambient. If you don't know an interrogation is running, you can't mount countermeasures. You can't slow your breathing or reframe the prompt because there's no prompt. Only a recommendation that lands when your sleep is thin and your guard is lower. To see the new Panopticon clearly, we go inside the data pipes. If data built the map, AI turns maps into moves. The digital Panopticon, how the footprint replaced the room. To understand how the footprint replaced the room, start with the sources of truth that don't feel like truth at all. Your phone's accelerometer logs the micro-jitters of a restless night. Battery drain patterns reveal heavy camera use at 2:11 a.m. Bluetooth pings trace, who shared your air on the train. Your card issuer timestamps a $9.49 purchase that always appears on Tuesdays when your meeting runs long. Location drift shows how you circle the block on stressful days before heading home. None of this looks like confession. It behaves like one. Each stream whispers something about state. Telemetry draws a pulse without touching skin. Heart rate from wearables, sleep depth from motion, app switching speed from attention volatility. Add social logs, who you respond to first, who you skip, the tone shift when you write to authority versus a friend. Purchase timing becomes its own language. Impulse clusters after midnight, restraint in the morning, relief buys on Fridays. The pattern isn't moral, it's mechanical. It says, here's when pressure moves this person. Now layer psychological signals. Stress spikes show up as rapid toggling, start, stop text composition, and longer dwell on anything that promises certainty. Routine disruption, late arrivals, missed check-ins, unusual paths to familiar places. Predicts openness to guidance, especially from perceived consensus. Social dependency arcs become visible when your engagement relies on a small hub. One person's reply stabilizes you, another's silence rattles you. None of these signals claim your biography. They sketch your current leverage points. What nobody knew at the time was how quickly cross-platform fusion would harden those sketches into maps. A shopping app, a fitness tracker, a messaging platform, a streaming queue, separately noise. Together, a vulnerability map that updates itself. A hesitation signature in a checkout flow combines with a 3-day sleep dip and a spike in queries about credit options. The system doesn't just guess financial stress. It calibrates how to approach you. Authority reassurance if you trust experts. Peer validation if you follow groups. Scarcity if your history shows FOMO. Here's the invisibility advantage. You can't deploy defenses you don't know you need. In a room, you slow your breathing, demand water, ask for a lawyer. In a feed, there's no moment to object. The interface is polite. The message feels like it arrived by chance. Your defenses, built for overt pressure, never wake. That's why ambient analysis matters. It keeps subjects unaware long enough for nudges to bypass the guardrails you'd raise if this felt like a confrontation. Microstory. A mid-level manager in Bogota starts sleeping less in March. His wearable shows fragmented nights. He searches how to refinance fast, late rent options, and side work gigs between 1 o'clock and 2:30 a.m. Across 2 weeks, his cart history shows abandoned essentials and cheap substitutions. On WhatsApp, he goes mute in one group, but increases reactions in another, where an old classmate posts hustle tips. 3 days later, a promoted clip lands between football highlights. A calm voice explaining a community program that helps professionals avoid predatory loans. The call to action is soft. Talk to someone who's already done it. The link opens a thread where confident peers swap success screenshots. He scrolls for 6 minutes, sends one private message, then another. The program doesn't mention politics. It shifts his trust anchor. 2 months later, his bank choices and voting intention move in tandem. Cause and effect don't announce themselves. They accumulate. Policy still thinks of interrogation as a confined exchange. Questions, answers, custody. Ambient collection slips past the definition because nothing asks you anything. Yet the outcome is familiar. Extracted insight, calibrated influence, behavioral adjustment. The gap is practical and legal. If no one interrogated you, who protects you from misuse of what they learned? Right now, oversight stumbles at machine speed. Meanwhile, the fusion engines keep stitching weak signals into decisive features. Scroll velocity correlates with arousal. Voice strain in a short voice note signals fatigue. GPS plus timing reveals coping rituals. Detours to a specific cafe after tense meetings. Long walks only on days you email that one supervisor. Comms metadata outlines hierarchy. Who you text when you're rattled, whose blue dot comms you on the map. Purchase cadence flags restraint. A break in the pattern marks a breachable moment. This is the moment everything changed. Once the map exists, content becomes a move, not a broadcast. The same headline arrives in 2 tones. Clinical for those who trust rational framing, testimonial for those who trust people like them. In one feed, the message leans scarcity. In another, it leans dignity and control. Timing follows circadian softness. The 2 a.m. trough for risk salience, the 7:30 a.m. commute for authority cues, the 9:17 p.m. lull for belonging. While that was happening in New York, a parallel run in Manila tuned for family threads. Not public posts, quiet forwards from concerned cousins. The illusion of care outruns the fact check. Resistance doesn't flare because the messenger is familiar. If data built the map, AI turned maps into moves. But before we step into prediction engines, hold this. The Panopticon isn't about seeing everything. It's about seeing enough, at the right moment, to move something that matters to you. The room needed a confession. The footprint only needs a pattern. Algorithmic alchemy. Prediction engines that preempt choice. To turn maps into moves, the system needs a nervous system of its own. Models that don't just catalog patterns, but anticipate your next micro-decision. Here's where behavioral modeling steps in. The engine watches hesitation, compliance, and your sensitivity to social proof, not as abstract traits, but as living sequences. A 2.3-second pause on a donate button means one thing if you just argued with a friend, another if you slept poorly and skipped breakfast. The model doesn't moralize. It calculates, drawing on multimodal inputs like smartphone usage timing, purchasing decisions, social media interactions, typing speed variation, and even sleep and heart rate drift from wearables to build vulnerability maps. Multimodal signals feed the calculation. Text tone, the tilt toward absolutes when you're cornered. Voice strain in a 12-second memo, barely audible but consistent when you're low on sleep. Scroll velocity that jitters after a tense email. Dwell time on faces that radiate certainty when you're doubting yourself. These signals don't arrive in a clean column. They arrive like weather. Transformer stacks, sequence models trained to read long context, learn your weather patterns. They don't need your secrets. They need your rhythms, updating predictions in near real time as new behavioral data arrives. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Real-time adaptation means tactics flip within minutes when the model detects resistance. If you ignore a fear-leaning post at 8:12 p.m., the system downgrades intensity and swaps in belonging cues by 8:19. If you mock an authority voice, it pivots to peer stories. If you share a skeptical link, it shows you a thread where someone like you was skeptical too, until they saw new data. That's not persuasion in the old sense. It's contouring pressure to your momentary shape. Unknown to most people scrolling, generative systems now produce content variants at scale. Same core message, hundreds of surface flavors. Network pairs your profile with the version you'll least resist. For analytic types, it's charts and caveats. For communal types, it's family stakes. For status seekers, it's a path to be early. The model tracks which variant reduces your hesitation signature. That becomes the default for your cohort until the cohort drifts. Then it re-optimizes. Exactly the optimization loop that produces psychological touch points at scale. In internal slang, operators talk about uncertainty windows. During job cuts, school disruptions, or volatile markets, windows widen. A campaign will call digital mirror calibrated messages to those windows. Economic narratives seeded exactly when search trends spiked for how to stretch rent and is my bank safe. The engine didn't just aim fear at everyone. It mapped who folds under scarcity, who rallies under duty, and who steadies when a credentialed voice says, here's the plan. The variant that dropped your scroll velocity and increased your dwell got more budget. The rest faded. There's a seductive promise baked into the dashboards. Measurable lift minute by minute. Engagement curves climb. Share rates rise, pulling nicks upward in the right zips. But there's one problem. Optimization doesn't care about long-term psychological harm. If ratcheting anxiety gets you to save more or vote differently, the system logs effective, not costly. When models prioritize near-term behavior change, they learn to amplify whatever shortens your delay between exposure and action, even if it leaves you more brittle tomorrow. Let's get concrete about architecture. Sequence models, transformers, ingest your timelines and message threads to predict state transitions. Calm to agitated, unsure to committed. Convolutional modules read your visual diet. Which faces, colors, and layouts keep you. Recurrent structures, tuned for communication cadence. Mark the moments you're most influenced by a certain friend or figure. Layered on top, generative content engines that produce linguistically diverse, culturally tuned assets, each tagged with psychological intents. Reassure, warn, invite pressure. Then comes the feedback loop. Every impression is a test. The engine watches micro-outcomes. A hover, a save, a share into a private chat. It adjusts targeting and tone on the fly. Resistance isn't failure, it's a new dataset. The system learns how your skepticism bends. Not to defeat it ethically, but to route around it functionally. A blunt message tripped your reactance? Next pass arrives as a question, framed by someone who sounds like a former version of you. Meanwhile, something else was happening across town. A parallel model didn't just predict individual moves, it predicted network propagation. It identified the 3 people in your circle most likely to normalize a new attitude for you. Not the loudest voices, the stabilizers. If they lean, you lean. So the system reaches them first, with a softer touch, then lets you discover the shift through them. From your perspective, you weren't persuaded. You just came around after talking to friends. This is the moment everything changed. Preemption replaced persuasion. Instead of waiting for you to choose and then trying to move you, the engine arranges the stage so that your most probable choice aligns with its objective. It times the prompt to your circadian trough. It frames the message to your bias profile. It seeds peer affirmation right before you reach for validation. By the time you feel the urge, the aisle's already cleared. In the aftermath of a big push, dashboards light with impact metrics. Open loops closed, attitudes shifted, decisions logged. The operators move on. You're left with a lingering pattern. A little more jumpy at 2 a.m., a little quicker to trust the chorus, a little more certain that the conclusion you reached was yours. Technically, it just wasn't alone. Ethics tries to keep pace, approval flows, risk flags, thresholds. For intensity, but machine speed outruns committee time. Black boxes don't explain themselves. Bias in training data skews who gets pressure first. And because nothing feels like a confrontation, most people never learn the skill of saying no to a notification that sounds like help. To see how this looks in the wild, we need the room around you, social architecture that makes these predictions stick. Social architecture, engineering the room around you. Knowing you is one thing. Moving you requires building the room you'll walk through tomorrow. That room isn't physical, it's the social field around your feed. Who speaks first, which voices echo, which faces feel real. The architecture starts with fake consensus, then layers choreography, surround sound, and payloads matched to your profile. Fake consensus isn't a swarm of throwaway bots. It's synthetic accounts with credibility trails. Years of banal posts, holiday photos, predictable job gripes, birthday congrats. They don't sell, they socialize. When needed, they pivot. One drops a concerned thread about bank stability. Another quotes a local teacher. A third shares a short clip from an economist. To you, it reads like a chorus arriving at the same worry from different paths. The point isn't perfect agreement. It's plausible convergence. Bot choreography turns that chorus into momentum. Comments arrive in timed clusters that spike recommendation engines. Early replies are measured, not extreme. Questions, nods, polite pushback, to mimic organic debate. 30 minutes later, supportive replies fold the pushback into reasonable doubts, then move the Overton edge one notch. Shares cross neighborhoods, parenting groups, small business chats, regional sports threads. The script isn't loud, it's consistent. Algorithms learn the rhythm and take over distribution. Cross-platform surround closes the exits. You see a headline on your main feed, then a cousin shares a shorter version in a family chat. On YouTube, the recommendation bar offers a sober explainer. In a professional group, someone posts a resources list. Ads trail you with a neutral pitch. Different wrappers, same spine. If you try to check by switching apps, the harmonized narrative meets you there. It feels like confirmation. It's orchestration. Now the emotional payloads, tuned to persona. Fear isn't a sledgehammer, it's calibrated. Lost framing lands softly for risk-averse profiles. Protect what you've built. Safety framing for caregivers. Keep your family steady. Scarcity for status seekers. Limited window to secure your spot. Authority tones for high trust in experts. Credentials, charts, careful caveats. Belonging for socially anchored types. Testimonials from people like us. The copy and visuals alter by inches, color, temperature, cadence, pronouns, to match your bias profile. Unknown to most targets. The same operation runs several emotional tracks in parallel, and watches, which reduces friction. If your hesitation signature drops when a verified badge speaks, authority gets budget. If your dwell increases around faces with regional accents, local voice leads. If your shares spike from peer confessionals, the campaign leans vulnerability. Someone admitting they ignored early signs and paid for it. Human moment, a family WhatsApp thread. An out forwards a short video. No panic, just be prudent. It's a calm voiceover over quiet piano, warning about new account limits and suggesting a checklist. No links at first, just a nudge to ask your bank 3 questions. 2 hours later, a different cousin shares a template message. Copy-paste this to your branch manager. The group isn't political, it's protective. By evening, screenshots fill the chat, managers replying, "We're reviewing policies." Each response becomes proof of risk. The seed wasn't rage, it was care. Meanwhile, something else was happening across town. Micro-influencers, teachers, barbers, clinic nurses received early outreach. Not heavy-handed. A DM saying, "We saw your post on budgeting. This resource might help your followers." The deck they get looks credible. Neutral typography, references, a helpline answered by patient voices. When they share, it isn't tagged as sponsored. Their trust transfers. This was the moment everything changed. Architecture replaced argument. The message matters, but the frame carries it. The who, when, and where of reception. A direct pitch might bounce. Neighbors' casual share after dinner sticks. A credentialed explainer during your commute feels responsible. A peer's small worry at 10:42 p.m. slips under your guard. Persuasion stops looking like persuasion and starts feeling like common sense. Choreography also protects against detection. Synthetic accounts gradually adopt local slang. Posting windows match time zones. Mistakes get introduced on purpose, typos, off-topic memes, to avoid the too clean signature of automation. Cross-language campaigns use in-country idioms, not machine translations. Content variance keeps platform heuristics guessing. No single phrasing repeats enough to trip spam rules, yet the psychological payload stays stable. The surround tightens with feedback. If a city's sentiment tilts faster than expected, the operation eases intensity to avoid backlash. If fact-checkers bite, narratives pivot to questions we're asking, which reframes correction as collaboration. If an investigative thread starts connecting accounts, the network sheds compromised nodes and routes through quiet backups seeded months earlier. From your perspective, none of this looks like an operation. It looks like Saturday morning scrolling that somehow lands in the same neighborhood wherever you go. You're not told what to think. You're shown what people like you are already thinking. That's the room. And once you're in it, prediction engines don't have to push hard. The floor slopes gently in one Operation direction. Digital Mirror, Venezuela, 2023 to 2024. 3 days before the first post, dashboards picked up a tremor. Late-night searches for Precio Dollar Hoy, spikes in WhatsApp forwards about bank limits, and a stall in supermarket card swipes between 8 and 10 p.m. The window widened, uncertainty, not ideology. That's when the operation slid into gear, mirroring open source reporting about a 2023 to 2024 digital influence push that reached tens of millions within 72 hours across multiple platforms. Stakes first. Urban professionals were tightrope walking inflation and pride. Teachers with side gigs, hospital admins juggling 2 phones, junior accountants who still sent money to parents. What mattered wasn't a speech. It was rent, shelves, and whether the bank app would open in the morning. Getting this wrong meant panic withdrawals, brittle trust, and streets that tense up before dawn. Getting it right meant nudging confidence, shaping blame, and steering action through channels that looked like help. Action looked quiet at first. A handful of accounts, credible old boring, began asking careful questions about financial hygiene. One posted a checklist: diversify accounts, confirm withdrawal windows, avoid predatory, rescue credit. Nothing partisan. Meanwhile, synthetic peers seeded micro-stories. I thought I was fine. Then my branch changed limits without notice. Here's what worked. Each story linked to a resource hub with somber fonts, clean charts, and a hotline answered in steady Spanish by people who sounded local. The hotline didn't pitch candidates. It pitched steps. Across platforms, variants tuned to neighborhoods and work cultures. For creatives in Chochow, the message leaned professional dignity. Protect your projects, keep clients paid. For teachers in El Paraiso, it leaned family and routine. Keep your pantry steady, avoid fees that eat dinner. For small business owners in Maracaibo, it leaned authority. Clips of credentialed economistas, walking through risk management without buzzwords. Every variant carried the same spine. Competence, not rage. Agency, not helplessness. The choreography built momentum. Bot scaffolds provided early engagement. Polite comments, local slang, a sprinkle of typos. Micro-influencers, lawyers with weekend radio slots, clinic heads, university alumni organizers, got direct DMs. You've been posting practical finance tips. Here's a tool your people might need. When they shared, it read as civic duty. Meanwhile, a lattice of WhatsApp groups amplified checklists stripped of links to evade perception of spam. Aunties, office managers, taxi coordinators, each became a relay. Inside the engine room, uncertainty windows drove timing. On days when official announcements rattled currency chatter, fear-forward variants spiked briefly. Loss framing that said, "Don't let tomorrow steal what you earned." During paydays, hope-forward content returned. Here's how people like us kept it flowing. Resistance markers, sarcastic replies, eye-roll emojis, copy-paste skepticism. Triggered pivots to "we're just asking questions," threads that folded critique into co-ownership. If a phrase got flagged by platform checks, the language softened and split across synonyms. No single string carried the load. Impact arrived in layers. First, sentiment in targeted zip codes tilted toward cautious but proactive. Then, banking behavior shifted. Small transfers to secondary accounts rose, cash-on-hand buffers compressed the week before expected announcements, and local merchants reported short bursts of conservative purchasing. Pollsters saw wobble where hard edges had been. Not a landslide, an incremental lean that compounded over 6 weeks. By the time major speeches landed, the ground beneath them had already been graded, consistent with research claims of hundreds of millions of psychological touchpoints, likes, shares, comments, driving measurable attitude shifts. One manager's microstory captures the texture. Andrea, 34, worked in HR for a tech importer. January felt normal if you ignored the late-night tab she kept open. Que posa si bonco limita retiros. In March, her WhatsApp family chat lit with a checklist from a cousin in Valencia. Sin panico prudentia. She copied it into her office group. A colleague replied with a link to a comm video. No logos, just a woman in a small office explaining how we kept payroll smooth last quarter. Andrea saved it, then called the hotline, expecting a lecture. She got a patient voice who asked about her payment flows and sent a template for client terms. 2 weeks later, she adjusted schedules and nudged her team to open secondary accounts. None of it felt political. When a pollster asked in April who seemed competent on economic stability, she surprised herself by choosing the option she'd mocked last year. It wasn't a conversion. It was a reweighting of what mattered. Meanwhile, something else was happening offstage. Diaspora networks in Madrid and Miami received Spanish dialect variants aimed at remittance senders. Help your people avoid fees and shocks. Here's how to schedule transfers. Those posts carried authority badges and links to fee calculators. Remittance timing synced with domestic checklists, creating the feeling of coordinated prudence that crossed borders without ever saying it was coordinated. The operation didn't blast ideology. It wrapped economic fear in competence and made competence feel communal. You didn't get yelled at. You got a plan, one that aligned quietly with a political choice. The measurable bit came later. Targeted demos showed a noticeable tilt in economic confidence questions tied to candidate credibility. Purchase baskets normalized faster post-scare for those touched by the resources. Bank behaviors steadied sooner. Small movements stacked. Ethical fog rolled in just as fast. Detection teams flagged synthetic networks with years of clean history that morphed overnight into advice hubs. Platform investigators found nothing overtly false, just guidance tuned to spike when vulnerability peaked. Diplomats cried foul. Operators pointed to public information shared responsibly. Oversight tried to draw a line between help and steerage. At machine speed, the campaign had already iterated past the first draft. The lesson insiders circled in notes later was blunt. In uncertainty cycles, economic fear outperforms ideology. Speak to the pantry, not the flag. Calibrate for dignity, not doom. And never forget, once the room is built around the feed, the floor tips without looking like a push. Case study, Mandarin recruitment, public-facing defection hooks. While Digital Mirror tuned fear to wallets in Spanish, a different machine spun up for Mandarin speakers in 2025. Same nervous system, data pipes, timing science, persona splits, but a new objective: get disillusioned insiders to step forward without ever meeting an officer in a cafe. Stakes first. The targets weren't cartoon spies. They were mid-level cadres, SOE accountants, procurement officers at tech parks, junior analysts in municipal bureaus, people with access, family obligations, and a rising sense that loyalty didn't guarantee safety. Purges ripple downward. One wrong association, and a career evaporates. Pressure isn't abstract. It's your kid's school seat and your parents' health file. Any outreach must thread a needle, signal authority and calm, promise control, and reduce the terror of first contact to a checklist. Action started in May 2025 with polished Mandarin videos on public platforms, YouTube mirrors, X, and Telegram channels that diaspora circles already watched. The narrative tactic wrapped 3 strands: disillusionment, family safety, agency over fate. Each video staged a quiet moment. A senior cadre noticing colleagues vanish. A junior clerk who sees irregularities and realizes silence won't protect anyone. A civil servant counting how many favors it takes to fix routine problems. No shouting, just a slow beat of, "You're not crazy to worry," aligning with widely reported public-facing CIA recruitment outreach in Mandarin that month. Then the hook. Authority signals delivered operational comm. A male voice, neutral and unhurried, explained how to reach a secure contact point. No movie slang, no bravado. If you choose to share, use Tor. Type this URL exactly. Do not use work devices. Erase browsing traces after. The tone conveyed competence and restraint. It didn't recruit with flattery. It coached with procedure. The way a good surgeon narrates steps to lower your heart rate. Matching reports that the videos provided specific tour-based contact instructions. Cultural calibration carried the weight. Honor, duty, and protection weren't rejected, they were reframed. Protect your family means protecting them from unpredictable power. True duty is to the people harmed by corruption, not the clique that benefits. Courage is not loud, it is precise. Copy avoided taboo landmines, while speaking the language of filial piety and collective responsibility. When the protagonist wrestled with risk, the line that landed was simple. I can't choose the system I was born into, but I can choose what kind of ancestor I will be. Protocolization mattered as much as poetry. The onboarding script was a ladder you could climb while shaking. Step 1. Get to the dark web safely. Step 2. Prepare non-attributable details that prove access without burning identity. Step 3. Wait. Do not recontact. We will reach you if safe. That last line lowered compulsive checking and reduced the digital exhaust that gets people flagged. The instruction set doubled as an ethics posture. No push, no rush, clarity over hype. Meanwhile, something else was happening across town. Diaspora groups on WeChat alternative spaces received cut-down clips with subtitles fine-tuned for regional phrasing. Taiwanese-leaning vocabulary here, northeastern cadence there. The diaspora wasn't the primary target, it was the relay. Cousins share privately. Former classmates circulate, for your awareness. A quiet surround built credibility without tripping sensors in the core network. Authority signals were layered carefully. The videos didn't overbrand, but the voice and presentation hinted institutional backing. Clean lower thirds, consistent typography, careful disclaimers. The message to risk-calculating insiders was, these people know what they're doing. The counterweight to fear was process. Operational comm wasn't a vibe. It was a promise that someone on the other end would be boring, which is exactly what you want when the stakes are prison. Risk trade-offs were clear. Public-facing outreach increases plausible deniability. Materials are general information, not direct solicitation. It also increases exposure. Adversaries study your script to build decoys. So the campaign embedded testable tells, small procedural quirks that authentic channels repeat and copycats miss. A phrase here, a time window there. Early contacts were vetted with questions only a real insider could answer without searching. Human moment. A provincial procurement officer scrolling late after a colleague's abrupt transfer. He watches a 2-minute clip, pauses at the line about ancestors, then puts the phone face down. 3 nights later, he follows the protocol on a personal laptop at a friend's place, writes 3 sentences, and stops. He deletes them, writes 2 different ones, attaches a single, harmless document to prove placement, and sends. Then nothing. No dopamine loop, no drip feed. 2 weeks later, a new message arrives through the channel he set up, asking one precise, boring question about a vendor list he knows by heart. He breathes for the first time in months. The lesson is sharp. Recruitment didn't chase bravado. It honored caution. It didn't fight culture. It reframed it. It didn't sell a fantasy. It offered a procedure. And it trusted that when fear and duty collide, some people will reach for the calmest hand in the room, even if that room is a phone. Intake systems, data assemblies that read the nervous system. To see how the system reads you without touching you, step into the intake layer. The assemblies that turn messy signals into something that looks like a heartbeat for your mind. The promise is simple. Don't ask what you can infer. The practice is intricate. Fuse weak signals until they act like strong ones. Start with biometric bleed. Wearables whisper through APIs. Resting heart rate drifting higher after midnight. Heart rate variability flattening on weeks you're anxious. Sleep stages fragmenting the night you argued. None of it screams, but correlated with content exposure. News spikes, crisis clips, bill reminders. The timeline reveals which stimulus raises arousal and which calms you. A late-night alert paired with elevated pulse during doom scroll hours becomes a lever. The same alert at noon barely glances you. GPS plus timing paints rituals you didn't know you had. The Tuesday detour to a quiet block after meetings. The longer route home only on days your calendar shows review. The sudden stop at a pharmacy at 9:41 p.m. Comfort-seeking and disruption flags stitched into a map. The intake doesn't need why. It needs when routines wobble. That's when guidance feels like relief. Comms metadata sketches your social nervous system without reading a single message. Who you ping first when rattled, who pings you when you go quiet, how fast you reply to authority versus peers. Thread lengths reveal dependence. Reply asymmetries show influence. A sudden drop in emoji use with one contact, and a rise with another signals a shift in trust anchors. The content stays sealed, the structure speaks volumes. Purchase cadence is its own EKG. Stress index spending patterns. Late night carts heavy on quick comfort. Weekday restraint that breaks after bad calls. Subscription pauses that coincide with uncertain headlines. A skipped grocery delivery after an unsettling announcement suggests conserve mode. A sudden premium buy after a bonus hit signals status restoration. Intake doesn't judge. It tags, scarcity primed, relief seeking, image repairing. Fusion engines sit downstream, doing the quiet, impossible seeming math. They stitch text tone from your posts to scroll velocity, location drift to wearable sleep, call timing to calendar pressure. Weak signals become decisive features once averaged across days and contexts. You don't need a confession of fear when you've got a 4-signal agreement. Shallow sleep, slowed morning replies, cautious spending, and an uptick in how-to searches. The label isn't pathology, it's state, destabilized, reassurance receptive. Meanwhile, something else is happening inside voice. Even brief voice notes carry strain markers, micro tremors, clipped phrasing, sighs you don't notice. Intake models trained on short clips flag fatigue, irritation, or effortful calm. Paired with message timing, those markers forecast when a nudge framed as permission. It's okay to delay. Will land versus when a firm cue, act before 5, will snap you to attention. On the visual side, cameras aren't needed to read you. Your gaze patterns in the feed suffice. Dwell time on faces that show certainty, micro pauses over red-toned thumbnails during stress, quick bounces off dense text when sleep dipped. Intake captures these micro choices and aligns them with your daily arousal curve. The result isn't a dossier, it's a daily tide chart. Here's the kicker. The intake layer doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be directionally right, fast, and continuously updated. Feedback from your next tap refines yesterday's guess. When you ignore an urgency cue at noon, but comply with a belonging cue at night, the system learns your circadian suggestibility. When you mute one topic, but watch neighbor testimonials, it pivots from issue to identity. Human moment. A nurse on rotating shifts thinks she's invisible to campaigns because she barely posts. Intake sees her differently. Her wearable shows sleep debt on weeks 2 and 4. Her navigation app logs extra time parked outside the clinic after night shifts. Her bank app shows small donations on mornings after rough nights. Intake tags her as empathy primed, depleted at dawn. So messages that ask for care-based action land at 7:15 a.m., framed as quiet help, not loud calls. She shares one link into a small chat at 7:22, then sleeps. By noon, the link has traveled farther than her conscious attention ever went. Ethically, this layer is where consent dissolves. No one asked her anything. The signals felt like life, not disclosure. Legally, frameworks built around content access miss the power of metadata and correlations. Operationally, intake is the unspectacular backbone. No single stream compelling, every stream together decisive. This was the moment everything changed. Interrogation stopped needing a prompt. The intake layer stress tests your mind like a lab without white coats. It notes baselines, perturbs gently with timed content, observes recovery, and refines. Not to diagnose you, but to know when to steer. And because the observations ride the rails of ordinary life, resistance rarely wakes in time. Trigger taxonomy. What gets pulled, when, and how hard? Once intake sketches your tide chart, operators pull levers. Not big theatrical levers. Calibrated nudges chosen from a shelf of triggers that have one job. Shorten the path from exposure to action without tripping your defenses. Think of it as a taxonomy. Fear bands, authority rails, social proof ladders, identity hooks, each tuned to tolerance and time to your weak hours. Start with fear bands. Fear isn't binary, it's a spectrum. Loss, safety, scarcity. Each band hits differently depending on your baseline. If intake shows you're scarcity sensitive, the system won't shout apocalypse. It whispers limited time windows, dwindling slots, end-of-day cutoffs. If safety cues steer you, it frames the same move as prudent protection. Keep your family steady. Loss aversion gets the gentlest edge. Don't let tomorrow erase what you've built. The dial shifts by degrees. Too light, no movement. Too hard, you push back. The sweet spot is just above your notice threshold. Authority rails come next. Some profiles steady when a credentialed voice says, "Here's the plan." For those, the rail is clean. Badges, charts, measured cadence. Others bristle at experts. The rail switches to lived authority, local figures with earned respect. A clinic nurse, a union rep, a coach. Verification is still there, but it's social, not institutional. The rail's job is to give permission without sounding like orders. Done right, it reduces decision friction. Done wrong, it activates reactance. Social proof ladders climb from peers to micro-influencers to everyone. If your hesitations fade when friends agree, the first rung is a small circle. A few comments from people like you, not thousands. As your comfort grows, the ladder adds layers. A trusted local voice, then a cluster of adjacent communities. Only late does it show momentum at scale, because early mass consensus can feel like pressure. The ladder knows where you start. It won't show the top until your grip is ready. Identity hooks are the deepest thread. They're not labels, they're values, memories, and aspirational belonging. If intake tags you as duty-centered, the hook frames action as honoring people who raised you. If you're dignity-driven, it casts the move as professional competence. Nostalgia softens suspicion for some. Images of steady years, simple rituals, the way we handled this before. For others, aspiration leads, early adoption, leadership among peers. The copy shifts a pronoun, a color temperature, a visual reference. Small edits, big pull. Timing science is the quiet co-conspirator. Circadian windows shape receptivity. In the 2 to 4 a.m. trough, urgency feels heavier, and reassurance feels like oxygen. So fear bands soften there. Too sharp, and you spiral. Just enough, and you prepare. Morning commutes reward authority rails. Structured plans feel doable. Evenings tilt toward belonging. Family threads, neighborhood chats, quiet checklists. Crisis announcements punch holes in the day. The system threads messages into those holes while emotional residue is still fresh. Personal lows, after tense calls, before hard meetings, open narrow windows. Content slips through, phrased as relief rather than demand. Now the choreography. What gets pulled, when, and how hard depends on live feedback. A fear band that lifts conversions today can exhaust you by Friday. The engine watches your microsignals and rotates payloads. If your scroll velocity spikes and comment tone turns sarcastic, it lowers intensity and nudges identity. If you save but don't share, it adds social proof. If you share into a small chat, it seeds authority replies there. Respectful, not overbearing. Microstory. At 1:58 a.m., a notification string lands during a vulnerability trough. The first push is gentle. Heads up, some branches adjusting hours tomorrow. Here's how to avoid lines. You don't tap. 2 minutes later, a friend forwards a checklist into your family thread. Quiet tone, no links. You read half, then put the phone down. At 2:06, an explainer thumbnail shows on your video app. Neutral colors, a local accent. You watch 42 seconds, then save it. The system notes your dwell. At 2:12, a DM from a group you trust arrives. We did this last time, worked fine. No demand, just past tense competence. You copy a template, schedule a bank task for morning, and sleep. No one yelled. 4 nudges aligned. Scarcity whisper, peer proof, local authority, identity. We handle this. As scale grows, the taxonomy holds, but distribution varies. Fear bands run narrower to avoid backlash in saturated zones. Identity hooks get more local. Authority rails pivot to lived voices when institutions lose trust. The art is restraint. The most effective operations underpull by default and escalate only when friction persists. Overpulling burns credibility and teaches resistance. Here's the quiet truth. Triggers aren't evil in themselves. We use them on ourselves. Alarms, calendars, gym partners, savings apps. The difference is intention and consent. When the taxonomy runs on your behalf, it's scaffolding. When it runs on you without your awareness, it's leverage. And at scale mechanics, leverage from 30 like people to 89 million. While triggers work one-on-one, scale changes the craft. A room could hold 30 people. A feed holds a nation. The leap isn't just bigger audiences. It's compressing design, approval, and deployment into hours while keeping messages human enough to pass for ordinary life. That means automation as scaffolding, not as a megaphone. Design used to be a week of copy drafts and review meetings. At scale, templates carry the load. Message spines, tone palettes, image families, and localized idioms ready to snap together. Operators select objectives, steady confidence, nudge prudence, reframe blame. Then slot persona variants the engine already proved. Approval moves from line-by-line edits to guardrails, banned claims, harm thresholds, intensity caps. Once greenlit, the system spins hundreds of variants that look handcrafted because they inherit years of micro-wins from smaller runs. Deployment happens in waves. Botnets don't sell the story, they set the table. Think of them as scaffolding that gives algorithms early signals, timed likes, measured comments, cross-posts that seed, this is worth your time. The early lift is subtle. Too much, and platforms notice the pattern. So cadence is tuned, a ripple at minute 10, a second at minute 40, a cross-platform echo at hour 3. Real people arrive when the scaffolds hand off to micro-influencers and ordinary users who carry the message without knowing it was staged. Detection evasion is a craft of variance. Phrases rotate. Visuals shift color temperature and composition. Dialects swap in region slang. Account histories include off-topic posts, soccer scores, birthday photos, complaints about traffic, to avoid the sterile signature of a tool farm. The network introduces imperfections on purpose. Typos, uneven cadence, occasional disagreements among allied accounts. Anything too symmetrical looks fake, and symmetry is easy to flag. Measurement shifts with scope. A room watches faces. A city watches deltas. Dashboards track population level drift. Search volumes, save to share ratios, sentiment slope by zip code, purchase clusters rebalancing after a scare. Individual conversion still matters in high-value nodes, but the prize is a curve that tilts a few degrees and stays there. That means fewer hero pieces and more consistent ambient cues that accumulate into what people are doing now. Scale also changes roles. The room had interrogators, translators, note-takers. The feed has model designers, red teamers, cultural tuners, distribution engineers. One team tunes transformer weights for better hesitation prediction. Another crafts iconography that reads competence in 5 dialects. A third runs live ops. When a phrase trips platform heuristics, they pivot the payload without losing the spine. The budget doesn't balloon on headcount. It moves toward compute, data partnerships, and preceding credibility trails months before activation. Automation compresses time. A 6-hour window can hold ideation, assembly, risk checks, and targeted launch if templates and guardrails are mature. That speed matters during uncertainty spikes, when attention is liquid and narratives are still malleable. The system doesn't aim for perfection. It aims for first credible contact that feels like help, then refines with feedback. While that's happening in one language, mirrored crews run parallel tracks in others. Cross-platform coordination avoids obvious copy-paste. The same spine, prudence, calm, agency, arrives as a checklist in one place, an explainer clip in another, a neighbor's DM elsewhere. The surround feels organic because distribution respects local rhythms. Payday cycles, commute windows, family chat peaks. Scale amplifies ethics and heat. Legal frameworks lag, platforms scramble, diplomats trade notes. Operators bank on ambiguity. Content is technically accurate, tone is careful, intent is strategic. The fog isn't an accident, it's a feature of ambient influence. Oversight bodies ask for logs. By then, variants and nodes have rotated. The campaign's residue lives in changed baselines. Who people trust by default, which actions feel normal. Here's the quiet mechanical truth. To reach 89 million, you don't shout louder. You standardize craft, modularize empathy, and let automation carry the boring parts so humans can tune the edges. At that scale, persuasion isn't an event. It's infrastructure. And when the pipes are in, the next campaign takes 6 hours, not 6 weeks. Law in the blind spot, the regulatory vacuum. While scale turned persuasion into infrastructure, the law stayed in the room. Most statutes still imagine interrogation as a bounded scene. Custody, questions, answers, a clock on the wall. Ambient profiling slips past that frame because nothing asks you anything and no door ever closes. The effect looks familiar, extracted insight, calibrated pressure, but the legal triggers never fire. Definitions lag first. Cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment hangs on direct coercion. Interrogation assumes a questioner and a subject, face-to-face or its obvious digital analog. Intake systems that infer your state from metadata don't meet that threshold. They aren't reading content, they're reading rhythm. The law wasn't written for rhythm. It was written for records and statements. Internationally, the mismatch widens. Platform jurisdiction floats above borders. Sovereignty clings to them. A campaign can be planned in one country, routed through servers in a second, distributed by accounts seeded in a third, and felt by people in a fourth. Which court owns the moment your out forwards a checklist? Which regulator governs a model that never touches the message text, but shapes what shows up next? Everyone and no one at once. Oversight bodies try to catch up, but machine speed outruns committee cadence. Approvals for overt operations can take weeks. Ambient influence iterates in hours. By the time a review board requests logs, variants have rotated, synthetic nodes have shed skins, and the measurable impact lives not in a single post, but in months of micro-adjustments across millions of feeds. You can audit a memo. You can't replay weather. Consent collapses under scale. Informed consent assumes awareness and choice. Most people don't know ambient analysis exists, let alone that their scroll velocity and sleep debt feed into trigger selection. Platforms bury disclosures in pages of policy. Intelligence exemptions carve wide corridors. When manipulation feels like help, even a clear label wouldn't trigger resistance. The harm is diffuse, stress ratcheted in vulnerable nights, attitudes nudged during uncertainty, agency thinned by a chorus that arrived naturally. Early patches look tidy on paper. Risk-based exclusions for minors, duration caps for campaigns, harm triggers that force a pause when distress indicators spike. In practice, the model routes around rules. If fear forward exceeds an intensity threshold, the system dilutes tone and moves the payload through identity and social proof. If duration caps loom, operations cycle variant families that reset the clock without changing the spine. Compliance becomes choreography. International law stalls in definitional fog. Prohibitions on interference assume clear attribution and discrete acts. Ambient surround trades in plausible deniability and continuous pressure. A state can deny operational authorship while its citizens share the campaign's backbone as community resources. Even when investigators trace scaffolds to familiar facilities, the content remains technically accurate, the tone careful, the intent arguable. Civic prudence, not political steerage. Platform enforcement lives in whack-a-mole. Detection systems hunt repetition and coordination. Mature operations prize variance and patience. Synthetic accounts accumulate years of ordinary life before carrying a message. When flagged, they don't fight. They retire and hand off to backups seeded earlier. Policy teams tighten rules around deceptive behavior. Operators invest in looking human enough to pass. The gap isn't malice, it's asymmetry of incentives and timelines. Meanwhile, the diplomatic heat rises. Governments file protests about psychological warfare against civilians. Responses point to public information, consumer-style messaging, and the absence of explicit falsehoods. Allies worry about precedent. What's permissible when competence messaging shapes economic confidence across borders? What counts as defense against a rival's own ambient influence? The answers shift with alliances and news cycles. Black box AI adds a final knot. If operators can't fully explain why a model chose a trigger sequence that raised arousal in a fragile population, who bears responsibility when harm surfaces? The developer who trained on historical influence data shot through with bias? The platform that delivered the variant? The agency that set objectives and thresholds? Legal theories prefer straight lines. The stack is a maze. Human moment. An analyst files a harm flag after seeing a spike in late-night anxiety markers in a district hammered by layoffs. The system auto-adjusts. Lower fear, higher reassurance, more peer stories, because that blend preserves engagement and keeps conversion high. The dashboard marks risk mitigated. The analyst wonders if mitigation and optimization just shook hands over the same person's sleep. This was the moment everything became obvious. The regulatory frame built for rooms can't see feeds. Without new definitions that treat ambient profiling and timed psychological payloads as interrogation by other means, oversight will keep chasing symptoms. Until then, the vacuum rewards whoever moves fastest, speaks softest, and leaves the fewest fingerprints. Ethics as a battleground. Optimization versus autonomy. The fight isn't loud. It lives in dashboards, approvals, and the uneasy space between what works and what we owe each other. Optimization sits on one side, curves, lifts, win rates. Autonomy sits on the other, consent, dignity, the right to think without being steered when you're most tired. The conflict isn't theoretical. It plays out every time a model chooses intensity over recovery because the chart looks better. Start with the black box. Operators can describe inputs and objectives, but not always why a model chose last night's sequence for a neighborhood that just lost its factory. The features make sense: sleep dip, search spike, peer chatter, but the path from those signals to a sharper scarcity nudge is opaque. When results arrive, more signups, steadier behavior, the box gets trusted again. It worked becomes it was right. That slide is the danger. Bias inherits quietly. Training data remembers who clicks under pressure, who trusts credentials, who shares in family threads. If certain groups were historically more exposed to scarcity content or authority appeals, the model learns to send them more of the same. Not because anyone chose to target them unfairly, but because success back-propagated through skewed history. Optimization repeats the past unless someone forces it to unlearn. Collateral psyche doesn't show up on the KPI sheet. A city sleeps worse for a week. A cohort hardens against dissent because their feeds harmonize too well. A nurse starts checking her phone at 2 a.m. for quiet help that keeps arriving. None of these count as incidents. They live in long tails, small increases in anxiety, subtle shifts in patience, slower recovery from uncertainty cycles. The system didn't mean to carve those grooves. It rewarded short-term compliance and learned to press where you're soft. Security arguments come fast. If we restrain ourselves, adversaries won't. True enough in a world where rival operations don't share our guardrails. But restraint isn't just moral theater, it's strategy. Overpulled populations become brittle, conspiratorial, easy to radicalize by anyone who promises relief. Ethical limits are not a kindness to targets. They're a firewall against blowback. Human moment. An analyst sees late-night arousal rising in a district with fresh layoffs. She flags harm. Shift to reassurance, reduce scarcity. The system responds, but not the way she means. It lowers overt fear, raises belonging and authority rails, and keeps conversion stable. The dashboard marks risk mitigated. She knows what happened. The model found a softer route to the same objective. The person on the other end still loses sleep. Meanwhile, something else is happening inside oversight. Committees ask for explainability. Why did we pick this tone, this timing? Engineers offer feature importance charts that satisfy nobody. Legal asks for thresholds. No fear forward beyond 20 days. No campaigns in crisis zones without human review. Operations gnawed, then design around the caps. Split variants, rotate creative families, reduce detectability, not intensity. The letter holds. The feeling persists. Black box ethics isn't solvable with a new slider. It needs friction by design. Places where optimization must stop and ask a human a moral question. Hard gates. No targeting minors. No running at known insomnia windows for flagged cohorts. No escalating intensity in communities with fresh trauma. Soft gates. Required cooldowns after measurable stress surges. Minimum transparency in distribution. You're seeing coordinated messaging. And the right to mute entire payload families for a season. These aren't perfect. They're speed bumps that keep the engine from treating people like terrain. Bias auditing has to cut deeper than demographic parity. It should ask which populations bear the psychological cost of experiments. If scarcity content achieves lift in low-income districts, the ethical response isn't to avoid helping. It's to match every pressure with a resource and to cap cumulative burden. The model shouldn't only learn what moves you. It should learn when to leave you alone. There's also the matter of informed refusal. Consent isn't realistic at scale, but notice can be. Labels that say, "This topic is under coordinated messaging," sound radical until you remember broadcast rules that already require disclosures. Transparency won't immunize everyone, but it grants a sliver of agency to those who want it. And it pressures operators to shape content that survives daylight. From the operator's perspective, this isn't self-sabotage. It's sustainability. Systems that honor recovery windows, respect community fatigue, and publish guardrails earn durable trust. They might lose short-term lift, but they gain long-term permission to speak. In an arms race, that edge matters. Finally, we circle back to autonomy, the quiet right to decide without arranged weather. The goal isn't to end influence. That's impossible and not even desirable in civic life. The goal is to keep influence from hijacking our weakest hours and our most human fears without our knowledge. It means building counterweights into the same tools that now move us. Audit trails for intensity, community vetoes for local saturation, and cultural red teams empowered to say no. Ethics isn't the brake on the mission. It's the boundary that keeps the mission from eating the people it claims to protect. If optimization can't see that, humans have to draw the line. Clearly, arms race and soon, where this goes by 2030. By now, the playbook is clear. Intake reads the tide, triggers pull levers, architecture carries the message. The question isn't whether this continues. It's how sharp it gets, how fast it adapts, and who can stop whom before 2030. Precision rises first. Models that once needed dozens of touches, to move you will need 3. Not because they'll know everything, but because they'll predict which lever matters today, at 7:41 p.m., after that calendar event you always dread. Hesitation signatures will shrink from seconds to patterns across 5 taps and 2 glances. The engine won't hammer. It'll place one message in the one gap where your guard's down, then leave. Fewer attempts, higher effect. Operations go continuous. Instead of launching campaigns and standing them down, the system will run like a thermostat, always measuring, always adjusting, not just for you, but for your cohort and the city around you. Minutes will matter. A rumor spikes at lunch. The surround shifts by 1:15. An outage hits a district. Reassurance routes there while scarcity softens everywhere else. What felt like discrete pushes will feel like whether that never stops. Counter AI moves from slogans to tools. Detection won't just chase fake accounts. It'll look for psychological fingerprints, payload families, timing cadences, sentiment slopes that don't occur naturally. Inoculation will get practical. Pre-bunking scripts that teach people to spot the choreography. Cooling off, defaults that delay forwarding during known vulnerability windows, feed-level labels that say, this topic is under coordinated messaging. Narrative hardening will feel like civic hygiene, shared heuristics, trusted check-ins, group norms that slow the spread. International escalation is baked in. Rivals aren't waiting. Mirrored stacks will run similar intake, triggers, and architecture tuned to their cultures. Deniability games will get tighter. Operations running through cutouts and proxy networks that resemble legitimate advocacy. Diplomatic spats will focus less on content and more on timing. Who moved sentiment during a crisis? Quiet agreements might outline red lines. No fear forward in disaster zones. No campaigns against hospitals. No targeting minors. Expect violations and tit-for-tat disclosures. Under the hood, hybridization accelerates. Edge devices will do more inference locally. Privacy theater for consumers, operational speed for operators. Wearables and cars will add context that makes timing sharper without explicit data sharing. Correlation does the lifting. Generative engines will learn to speak small. More DMs and comments, fewer hero posts, because intimate channels evade platform sweeps and feel like care. Here's the uncomfortable twist. Commercial and state influence will blur until they're functionally indistinguishable. Ad tech already optimizes for behavior. Security stacks optimize for compliance. By 203, the same vendor could sell reduced churn on Monday and stabilize sentiment on Friday. Oversight that focuses on who runs the stack will miss the point. We'll need rules about what the stack is allowed to do to human attention, regardless of buyer. Meanwhile, something else is happening inside communities. People will get tired, not of information, but of arranged weather. The practical reality won't change. The feed stays on, but the appetite for sovereignty will grow. You'll see default friction show up in interfaces. Batch notifications, nighttime moratoriums, explainer prompts before shares. Teams will adopt crisis cadence agreements, pre-validated sources, timed check-ins, veto rights for burnout. Neighborhoods will keep mutual aid lists that double as rumor breaks. Security people will argue for more automation to counter more automation. Advocates will push for human in the loop at true choke points. When intensity rises, when trauma is fresh, when stakes touch identity. Both are right. The middle path is speed with brakes. Real-time models that can't cross certain lines without a hand on the switch, and logs that communities can audit when they feel steamrolled. The likely endpoint by 2030 isn't dystopia or purity. It's normalization. Influence becomes infrastructure. The only real choice will be whether that infrastructure has guardrails that respect tired humans. The feed won't turn off. So protocols become the point. We'll shift from diagnosis to defense next. The sovereignty kit you can run without going offline. The same science that moved you can protect you, if you build habits that add just enough friction to let your better judgments catch up. The The Sovereignty Kit, for a framework for cognitive autonomy. We can't turn the feed off, so we build breaks. The Fora framework is a kit you can run without going offline. Recognize, re-rate, reroute, rehearse. It's not purity culture. It's a way to buy back seconds. The gap where choice lives, when the system aims for your weak hours. Recognize starts with pattern literacy. You're not decoding every trick, you're naming families. Fear spikes sound like limited window. Before it's too late, protect your family. Authority cues arrive as badges, charts, measured cadence, or local voices with earned clout. Consensus illusions feel like many small accounts arriving at the same common sense point. Identity hooks tilt toward duty, dignity, nostalgia, or aspirational belonging. Give each family a short label you'll actually use. When the feeling lands, tight chest, urgent scroll, say the label aloud or write it. Naming pulls you out of the current enough to see it. Build a small tell list for yourself. What does your hesitation signature look like? Maybe you reread headlines at 2 a.m., or you DM one particular friend before decisions. Note color and cadence tells. Red-toned thumbnails and staccato copy tend to push speed. Cool palettes and longer sentences slow you down. Recognize is a mirror, not a shield. It gives you the first millisecond of choice. Re-rate means reassigning salience. The feed wants now to feel like everything. You downgrade urgency on purpose. Try a two-step. Label what's being pulled. Fear, authority, belonging. Then assign a default wait time. Fear forward gets 12 hours. Authority rail gets a second source. Belonging nudge gets a private check-in with a trusted circle. Put these rules somewhere visible. When the nudge hits, you don't debate, you follow the rule. Use a simple rating card for messages. What's the claim? What's the queue family? What's the action it wants? What happens if I wait 24 hours? Most pushes can't survive that last question. If the content punishes delays with escalating urgency, that's information. Real help tolerates your pause. Reroute is environment editing. You control the rails that carry payloads. Start with notification governance. Batch non-critical alerts into 2 windows per day. Silence late-night pushes except from a small, human emergency list. Timebox absorbing topics. Economic scares get 15 minutes after lunch, not the 2 a.m. trough. Create cool rooms on your phone. Folders that only hold sources you've pre-cleared for calm tone and correction. Feed fasting isn't abstinence. It's rotation. Set 1 day a week where your home screen rearranges to remove the 3 apps that most often trigger scarcity or rage. Replace them with tools that lengthen attention. Long form, books, even a notes app for decision journaling. When the urge to check hits, open the journal and write the urge instead. That move rewires compulsion into reflection. Reroute also means social scaffolding. Curate small groups with explicit norms. No forwarding in the first hour, sources shared with a 1-line claim summary and a label of the queue family. A default sleep on it for anything that demands quick decisions. These groups become your alternative architecture. Human friction against machine timing. Rehearse is the muscle. You pre-commit scripts because improvising at 2 a.m. is a losing bet. Write short replies you can paste when a trigger lands. For fear bans, looks urgent. I'm waiting 12 hours. We'll review tomorrow. For authority rails, appreciate the detail. What's your second source? For social proof, seeing traction, parking it until I hear from 2 people offline. For identity hooks, noted. Does this align with my 3 values this quarter? Keep them in your notes. Rehearsal turns values into reflexes. Run cooling off defaults for actions with downstream cost. Financial moves, public posts, messages you'll regret. Set calendar, hold, events that force a tap before sending. Use decision journals for recurring categories. Donations, votes, big purchases. Log the queue family you felt, the action you took, and how you felt 48 hours later. Patterns emerge. You'll spot which payloads own you and which you shake off. Extraction mini-plays help when the field is hot. If a thread spikes your arousal, step into a 3-step exit. Breath pattern reset, for in 6 out 6 times. Physical shift, stand, water, window. Then context swap, 2 minutes of something sensory, dishwashing, stretching. After the reset, write 1 sentence. If this is staged weather, what would it want me to do? That question alone slows the slope. Microstory. A product manager noticed her 2 a.m. spirals. She set batch notifications, moved crisis topics to daytime, and wrote 3 replies she could paste half asleep. She kept a 30-day decision journal. By week 2, her reactivity baseline dropped. Fewer late-night saves, more morning checks, less DM forwarding. The change wasn't saintly. It was mechanical, seconds reclaimed, habits staged. The kit scales beyond you. Share the 4 language with a partner or team. Agree on a red flag lexicon. Scarcity push. Badge voice. Chorus. Set group re-rate rules. Nothing critical in the trough. 2 source minimum for action. A shared cooldown window after major announcements. Ritualize check-ins. 5 minutes, twice a week, to name the weather and decide what you'll ignore together. This isn't about becoming unmovable. It's about choosing when to be moved. Influence will keep running like infrastructure. So will your autonomy, if you build it into your day on purpose. Recognize, re-rate, reroute, rehearse. The kit is small. The seconds you buy back are big. Collective immunity, network-level defenses. Autonomy scales when groups agree on friction. Start with shared heuristics, a simple red flag lexicon everyone uses. Scarcity push. Badge voice. Chorus. Short labels beat arguments. When a message lands, anyone can tag it, which shifts the vibe from reaction to review. The point isn't to win debates, it's to slow the room. Slow the spread rules help. In chats, adopt a 1-hour hold before forwarding non-urgent items. Add a second source nudge. If you forward, include 1 independent source or clearly mark it as unverified. A tiny bit of friction. Typing a summary, naming the Q family, cuts accidental amplification. People forward less when they have to explain why. Trust web's beat fact checks alone. Build small, verified human circles. 5 to 15 people who can sanity check hot items in real time. Verify identity through offline ties. You've worked together, shared a meal, or confirmed with a mutual friend. These circles become your first-mile filters. They don't have to agree, they just have to be real. Crisis cadence matters. Pre-agree where your group looks when big news hits. 2 or 3 sources with known correction habits. 1 local resource, 1 independent analyst. Set check-in rituals. A 5-minute call or thread twice a week during hot cycles. Decide ahead of time who leads the pause. Someone with temperament, not just credentials. When the feed surges, the cadence catches you. Add friction at the edges. Use pinned messages with group norms. No late-night forwards in the 2 to 4 a.m. trough. No major decisions after 9 p.m. And a default sleep on it after announcements that spike arousal. Create a park it, thread where hot items go to cool before they enter the main chat. Most rumors die in parking lots. Make transparency normal. Label posts with the Q family and intended action. Authority rail, asking you to sign. Belonging nudge, urging share. When motives are on the table, impulse slows. Encourage small, why now? Prompts under urgent posts. If timing can't be explained without hand-waving, the group waits. Build a network dashboard that's human, not fancy. Track 3 things across your team. Late-night message volume, forward-to-comment ratio, and sentiment volatility in group chats. If midnight volume spikes for 2 nights, trigger a quiet cooldown. If forwarding outruns conversation, disable link previews for a day. If tone swings hard, schedule a quick call. You're not doing surveillance, you're watching your own weather. Pre-bunk together. Once a month, run a 15-minute drill. Take a likely scenario, bank limits, school closures, supply scares, and practice your cadence. Who checks local sources? Who writes the hold message? Who posts the 2-sentence explainer that calms the thread? Drills sound geeky until you see what they prevent. Use layered trust. Pair a detail checker with a tone keeper. One verifies claims, the other watches how the message lands. If the tone keeper flags rising anxiety, the group routes through reassurance content before sharing anything else. Facts matter. So does nervous system care. Empower vetoes. Give anyone the right to call a 12-hour pause without debate. If 2 people call it, extend to 24 hours. No shaming. No, why are you blocking truth? The norm is simple. When arranged weather blows through, we close the windows first, then decide. Microstory. A PTA chat gets a safety alert about new pickup rules. A parent tags it scarcity push and calls a 1-hour hold. The checker calls the school. The tone keeper drafts a comm note. We're verifying. No action yet. An hour later, the update. Policy change is next week, not tomorrow. The group sighs, thanks the pause, and goes back to lunches. No panic train. Just practice breaks. Unknown to the group, The same holds ripple across 3 adjacent charts because they share one member and the same lexicon. That's how immunity spreads, one pocket at a time, using common words and small rituals. You don't need to outsmart the system. You need to outslow it together. If you lead a team, formalize this. Add a page to the playbook. Cue labels, hold rules, sources, veto protocol, and cooldown triggers. Review it quarterly. Make it boring. Boring is durable. Your phone isn't a device. It's a doorway strangers use to practice on your nervous system in real time. If you want the Sovereignty Kit checklist and weekly drills, subscribe and watch the next episode. We run live inoculations on 3 real feeds. Turn on notifications, then schedule them for 2 windows a day. Don't let the feed pick the moment.